The wisdom of releasing resistance. Have you ever noticed that the more desperately you try to hold on to a handful of water, the faster it slips through your fingers? We spend so much of our existence clenching our fists, demanding that life conform to our blueprints, yet the tighter we squeeze, the more exhausted we become. What if the very struggle to control your world is the primary source of your unrest? Let us explore why releasing your grip is the key to true power. Introduction. Why letting go is the greatest hidden strength. What if the secret to gaining everything you have ever wanted, peace, clarity, purpose, was not in acquiring more, but in releasing what you already hold? Consider the paradox of a clenched fist. When your hand is balled tight, you are ready for a fight, yes, but you are also incapable of receiving a gift. You cannot hold, touch, or feel anything new because your energy is entirely consumed by the effort of holding onto what is already there. We spend a staggering amount of our internal resources resisting the present moment. We treat reality as an obstacle to be overcome rather than a teacher to be understood. We fight the traffic, we argue with our history, we demand that our partners act according to our internal scripts, and we wrestle with the calendar, begging time to move faster or slow down. We treat life like a wild, rushing river that we must dam up, believing that if we can just build the wall high enough, we will finally be safe. But the water always finds a way, and the dam, that monument to our need for control, eventually cracks under the pressure of the current. This resistance is the hidden engine of modern suffering. It is the architect of our anxiety, the fuel for our perfectionism, and the wall that keeps us from intimacy in our relationships. When we resist, we are essentially declaring that the present moment is a mistake, an error in the cosmic design that we must correct. Yet, the more we fight, the more fractured our peace becomes. We fear the uncertainty of tomorrow, we mourn the disappointment of yesterday, and in the process, we become ghosts in our own lives, missing the texture and depth of the only time that actually exists. In the midst of this struggle, we often find a strange, quiet invitation in ancient teachings. Consider the words, "The kingdom of God is within you." This is not merely a theological statement, it is a profound psychological truth. It suggests that the peace you seek is not a commodity to be imported from the outside world once you have finally fixed your life. It is an internal state, accessible the moment you stop demanding that the world look different than it does. When we hear the instruction, "Do not worry about tomorrow," we are being asked to dismantle the machinery of resistance. It is an invitation to trust, to step out of the frantic labor of trying to script the future, and to embrace the radical simplicity of being right here, right now. "Peace I leave with you" is a promise that serenity is not earned through conquest, but inherited through surrender. This is not the surrender of the defeated, but the surrender of the wise. The recognition that you are part of a larger flow. Like a bird navigating a storm, the secret is not to fight the wind, but to adjust your wings. The bird does not blame the atmosphere, it works with it. Why is letting go so difficult? Because we are convinced that if we release our grip, everything will fall apart. We believe that control is our only armor against the chaos of uncertainty. But look at the natural world. The forest does not try to grow, it unfolds. The seasons do not demand to be changed, they pass. Nature possesses an inherent resilience that comes precisely because it does not resist its own reality. You are not separate from this wisdom. You are a part of it. As we embark on this exploration, we will peel back the layers of the ego, examine why we hold on so tightly, and discover why, in the quiet art of letting go, you finally find the power to. Chapter 2, The Illusion of Control. Why do we spend so much of our finite time trying to build impenetrable fortresses around our lives? We organize, plan, calculate, and insure ourselves against every conceivable scenario, convinced that if we can just anticipate every turn, we will remain safe. We operate under the deep-seated assumption that security is a result of control. Yet, if we look closely at our lives, we often find that the most profound moments, the ones that defined who we are or brought us our deepest joy, were entirely unplanned. They were the moments where our carefully curated scripts were interrupted by the unexpected. The human mind is a master of pattern recognition, which is a gift for survival but a curse for serenity. Because we can predict where the sun will rise or when the seasons will change, we mistakenly believe we can apply that same predictive logic to our careers, our health, our relationships, and our financial stability. We treat the future as a puzzle to be solved rather than a mystery to be experienced. When we fail to predict an outcome, when a project falls through, a relationship ends, or an economy shifts, we feel like a failure. We think we made a mistake, as if the universe were a math test we were supposed to get a perfect score on. This desperate reach for control is an attempt to escape the discomfort of uncertainty. It is the ego's way of saying, if I can just make everything predictable, I won't have to feel afraid. But uncertainty is the heartbeat of existence. Think of a garden. You can prepare the soil, plant the seeds, and water the ground, but you cannot force the seed to sprout or command the sun to shine. You are a partner in the process, not the master of the life force that animates it. The gardener who tries to pull on the stem to make the plant grow faster only succeeds in breaking the plant. Growth requires a surrender to processes that are fundamentally beyond our command. We see this illusion of control manifest in our relationships as well. We try to mold the people we love into reflections of our own comfort zones. We want our children to follow specific paths so we feel like successful parents. We want our partners to behave in predictable ways so we feel secure. We believe that if we just say the right things or set the right boundaries, we can guarantee a specific emotional outcome. But people are not machines, and love is not a transaction. You cannot manufacture intimacy, and you certainly cannot control how another person experiences their own internal journey. When we let go of the need to control others, we stop being managers of people and start being participants in relationships. History is a long record of people who tried to command the tides and found that the ocean simply kept rising. We look back at leaders and empires that sought absolute, centralized control, and we see that their downfall was almost always their inability to adapt to the shifting sands of reality. In the natural world, the strongest structure is not the rigid, immovable wall, but the complex, adaptive network. Think of a spider's web. It is incredibly delicate, seemingly fragile, and yet it is engineered to flex with the breeze. If it were a solid sheet of glass, the first gust of wind would shatter it into 1,000 pieces. Flexibility is the highest form of strength because it is capable of absorbing the chaos of life without breaking. We often confuse control with responsibility. We think that if we stop trying to dictate outcomes, we will become passive, lazy, or irresponsible. But the opposite is true. When you stop wasting your energy trying to control the uncontrollable, like the opinions of others, the past, or the whims of fate, you actually reclaim your capacity to act wisely in the present. You move from a state of frantic reactivity to a state of calm, intentional engagement. You stop trying to steer the ship by shouting at the waves and start steering it by adjusting the sails. The difference is subtle but transformative. One is a desperate struggle against the environment, the other is a harmonious navigation of it. This shift requires us to reconcile with the fact that we are not the authors of every chapter in our story. We are co-creators. There is an intelligence in the way things unfold, a wisdom in the way seasons turn, in the way a broken heart eventually heals, and in the way an unexpected ending often paves the way for a necessary beginning. When we stop holding the pen so tightly, we allow the story to have more depth, more nuance, and more integrity than anything we could have scripted on our own. Consider the anxiety that hums in the background of your day. How much of it is tied to what-if scenarios? What if I lose my job? What if I'm not good enough? What if things don't work out? These are all expressions of the ego's desire to maintain a predictable, controlled outcome. We are essentially trying to solve problems that do not yet exist, spending our current energy on future possibilities that may never come to pass. This is the definition of mental exhaustion. Trust, the antidote to this, is not blind faith. Chapter 3, Acceptance is not giving up. There is a common misunderstanding that plagues our understanding of peace, the belief that acceptance is synonymous with passivity or defeat. We fear that if we truly accept a situation, especially a difficult one, we are somehow condoning it, waving a white flag, or resigning ourselves to a life of mediocrity. We imagine that letting go means sitting idly on a park bench while our problems run rampant. But this could not be further from the truth. In reality, acceptance is the most active, courageous, and strategic stance one can take. Think of a doctor performing a surgery. To heal the patient, the surgeon must first accept the reality of the injury as it is. They cannot walk into the operating room and decide to be angry at the wound, or wish that the anatomy were different, or pretend that the infection isn't there. If they waste their energy resisting the facts, they are not helping. Acceptance for the surgeon is a sharp, clinical, and necessary assessment of what is happening. By accepting the reality of the patient's condition, they are then empowered to act with precision, wisdom, and purpose. Acceptance is the bridge that allows us to move from the paralysis of complaint to the power of constructive action. We often mistake resistance for strength because it feels active. When we are frustrated, we are doing something, we are fuming, planning, worrying, and arguing. It feels like we are fighting for our lives. But in truth, we are just spinning our wheels in the mud. Acceptance is the quiet shift that pulls the car out of the mud so the tires can finally find traction. It is the moment you stop fighting the reality of a flat tire and start the process of changing it. The struggle is the waste, the acceptance is the fuel. This is a lesson we see repeatedly in the natural cycle of the seasons. A tree does not resist the coming of winter. It does not look at the fading light and tries to hoard its leaves, fighting the inevitable chill in a desperate bid to remain in summer. If it did, it would be brittle and break under the weight of the ice. Instead, the tree practices a profound form of acceptance. It sheds its leaves, pulls its energy inward, and enters a state of dormant rest. It accepts the reality of the cycle, and because it does, it survives to bloom again when the spring arrives. Acceptance is not an end. It is a necessary part of the cycle of renewal. Why do we find this so hard to accept in our own lives? It is usually because of our attachment to an idealized version of how we think things should be. We have an image in our minds of the perfect relationship, the perfect career path, or the perfect physical state. When our actual experience deviates from that image, we treat it as a failure. We judge the moment as bad and ourselves as unlucky. Acceptance asks us to drop the image and engage with the substance. It asks us to look at the broken cup, the cancelled meeting, or the unexpected obstacle and say, this is what is happening, and I am here for it. In the history of philosophy, the Stoics were perhaps the greatest masters of this distinction. They taught the idea of the dichotomy of control, the simple, yet life-altering realization that we must distinguish between what is in our power and what is not. We cannot control the behavior of others, the economy, the weather, or the past. We can only control our own perceptions, our own intentions, and our own actions. Acceptance is the act of anchoring ourselves firmly in what we can control while letting go of the exhausting, futile attempt to manage what we cannot. It is the ultimate form of personal responsibility. Consider the person dealing with a chronic illness or a sudden financial setback. Resistance tells them that this shouldn't be happening, that it is unfair, and that they are being robbed of their potential. That path leads to bitterness, which only amplifies their pain. Acceptance tells them, this is the reality I am working with today. By accepting the limitation, they are suddenly free to innovate, to find new ways to live, to seek new joys, and to build a life that is meaningful within their current constraints. They are not giving up on life. They are refusing to give up on their capacity to find peace within it. There is a subtle, almost gentle humor in the way we hold on to our resistance. We act as if our internal disapproval of a traffic jam will somehow clear the road. We act as if our inner indignation at the changing weather will cause the clouds to part. When we finally catch ourselves in the act, we have to laugh at the absurdity of it. We are not the masters of the universe, and it is truly a relief to realize we don't have to be. We are participants in a grand, unfolding drama, and our primary role is to be present, observant, and responsive. This is the deeper meaning behind the wisdom of surrender. When a person is caught in a river with a strong current, the primary advice for survival is to not fight the water. Fighting the current only leads to drowning. The instruction is to float, to let the current take you, and to steer yourself toward the bank when the opportunity arises. You are still moving, you are still navigating, and you are still in control of your direction. You are simply doing so in harmony with the power of the river rather than in opposition to it. Acceptance is that float. It is the decision to stop drowning in your own resistance so that you can navigate the waters of your life with the wisdom of someone who understands how the world actually works. When you choose acceptance, you aren't choosing defeat. You are choosing to be present, to be aware, and to be effective. You are choosing to stop spending your limited life force on fighting what is already here and start spending it on how you want to move forward. Peace is not found in a life that is free from difficulty. It is found in a heart that has mastered the art of accepting the difficulty, understanding it, and using it as a stepping stone toward a more resilient, compassionate, and meaningful existence. Chapter Summary. Acceptance is often confused with passivity, but it is actually a highly active and strategic stance. Resistance feels like action, but it is essentially a drain on your emotional and mental energy. Acceptance functions as a clear, necessary assessment of reality, allowing for precise and wise action. Nature illustrates that surrendering to the natural cycle, like winter, is essential for survival and renewal. Our suffering often stems from clinging to an idealized should rather than engaging with what is. The Stoic dichotomy of control is the foundation for practicing acceptance effectively. Acceptance allows you to stop fighting the impossible and focus your energy on what you can truly change. Bitterness is the result of resisting reality, peace is the result of working with it. Surrender is not defeat, it is the wisdom of aligning your movement with the current of life. True peace exists within the heart that has learned to Chapter 4, The Ego's Endless Battle. Have you ever stopped to observe the voice in your head? Not the one you use to plan your grocery list or solve a work problem, but the one that is constantly narrating your life, judging your experiences, and, most importantly, defending your identity? This is the ego. It is the architect of our personality, the keeper of our history, and the primary engine of our resistance. The ego is obsessed with being right, being seen, and being safe, and it views any situation that threatens those goals as a personal attack. The ego is like a bodyguard who has been on duty for far too long. Initially, its job was to protect you, but over time, it has become paranoid. It perceives a difference of opinion as a loss of status, a change in plans as a failure of competence, and the success of others as a reflection of your own inadequacy. It is perpetually caught in a battle because it believes that its existence depends on drawing lines between me and you, mine and yours, good and bad. This boundary making is useful for navigating the world, but when it turns into rigid walls, it creates the very isolation we spend our lives trying to escape. Consider a simple, everyday conflict, like someone cutting you off in traffic. The ego immediately flares up. It doesn't just register the movement of the other car. It interprets the act as a sign of disrespect. How dare they, the ego whispers. Don't they know who I am? I was here first. Suddenly, your pulse quickens, your hands grip the wheel tighter, and your day is ruined by an event that lasted 3 seconds. You are fighting a war with a stranger who doesn't even know you exist. This is the ego at work. It is fighting to preserve a sense of status that has absolutely no bearing on your actual safety or well-being. The ego hates the concept of letting go because, to the ego, letting go feels like death. If you stop defending your position, if you stop insisting on being right, if you stop projecting an image of perfection, who will you be? The ego thrives on the narrative of the separate self that must constantly be polished, protected, and projected. It fears that if it relaxes its grip, it will dissolve into nothingness. Yet, the irony is that the moment you stop feeding the ego's need for control, you do not disappear. Instead, you discover the deeper, more authentic you that was there all along, the witness, the observer, the presence that can see the ego for what it is. We often try to solve this by fixing the ego, which is just another trap. We try to be spiritually superior, or more humble than others, which is still the ego wearing a different mask. It's like a thief dressing up as a monk to keep on stealing. The path is not to destroy the ego, for that is a violent act that only creates more resistance, but to bring it into the light of awareness. When you can witness your own defensiveness, when you can catch yourself feeling slighted, or when you notice your own need to impress others, you are no longer in the grip of the ego. You are watching the ego. That gap, the space between the ego's drama and your conscious awareness, is where freedom lives. This battle is not just against others, it is a war we wage against our own humanity. We tell ourselves stories about who we are: I am a person who always struggles with money, or I am someone who is always unlucky in love. We cling to these labels because they give us a sense of identity, even if that identity is one of suffering. To let go of these stories is terrifying. Who are you if you aren't the person who has been mistreated? Who are you if you aren't the person who is constantly battling the system? The ego wants to keep you small and familiar because it feels safer than the vast, uncharted territory of simply being. Nature, once again, offers a profound lesson on this. Look at a river. It doesn't have an ego. It doesn't worry about whether it is good enough or moving fast enough or being respected by the rocks. It simply follows the gravity of the earth. It is completely itself, without needing to prove anything to anyone. It flows where it must, it pools where it is deep, and it rushes where it is narrow. It has no identity to defend, and therefore, it is never afraid of being diminished. If we could approach our own lives with that same lack of self-consciousness, imagine how much energy we would save. Think of the teaching, the kingdom of God is within you. This internal kingdom is not a place where the ego reigns supreme. It is a place of profound equality. When you realize that the same life force that flows through you flows through everyone else, the ego's need to be better than, or different from, begins to evaporate. You stop looking at others as obstacles to your success or threats to your status and start seeing them as fellow travelers. This shift is the beginning of true compassion. Compassion is not a polite act, it is the natural byproduct of the ego's walls coming down. This isn't about becoming a doormat. It's about becoming a mirror. When you aren't busy defending your own ego, you can actually see what is happening in the room. You can listen without planning your rebuttal. You can accept a critique without feeling crushed. You can experience a mistake without labeling yourself a failure. You become a participant in reality rather than a protector of your own image. You gain the power of responsiveness over the weakness of reactivity. The ego's battle is endless because it is based on a false premise, that you are separate from life. The truth is that you are an expression of life. Every time you let go of a need to be right, every time you drop a grudge, every time you admit you don't know the answer, you are taking a breath of fresh air. You are stepping out of the small, cramped house the ego built and into the vast, open space of the present moment. It is quiet here, it is spacious, and, most importantly, it is where you are finally free to be exactly who you are, rather than who you think you need to be to survive. Chapter Summary. The ego acts as a defensive bodyguard that has become paranoid, interpreting neutral events as personal attacks. We spend our lives fighting imaginary wars to preserve a sense of identity that is ultimately fragile. Letting go feels like death to the ego, which is why it resists change with such intensity. The path to freedom is not destroying the ego, but simply observing its antics with conscious awareness. Our attachments to labels and stories about our own past keep us trapped in familiar patterns of suffering. The ego wants to keep us small and predictable, presence allows us to be vast and adaptive. Like a river, we can find true power when we stop needing to prove our worth to the world. Compassion naturally arises when the ego's boundaries begin to soften and we recognize our shared humanity. Letting go of the need to be right frees us to engage with life as it actually is, rather than as we want it to be. The shift from ego-driven reactivity to consciousness-driven responsiveness is the key to emotional resilience. Chapter 5, Finding Freedom in Uncertainty. We are taught from childhood that uncertainty is a problem to be solved. We are told to pick a career path, build a retirement fund, and map out our future in vivid detail. We treat the unknown like a dark room we must illuminate with the flashlight of our plans, fearful of what might be lurking in the corners. But what if uncertainty is not the enemy of your peace, but the very soil in which your growth is planted? When you insist on knowing exactly how everything will turn out, you effectively close the door on the infinite possibilities that life might have in store for you. Think about the most transformative moments in your life. Did you plan for them? Did you anticipate exactly how they would unfold? Probably not. We rarely plan for the sudden opportunity that changes our career trajectory, or the chance meeting that leads to a profound relationship, or the challenge that finally forces us to develop a strength we didn't know we possessed. Life has a way of being far more creative than our limited, ego-driven imaginations could ever be. By clinging to a rigid roadmap, we often miss the beautiful, unexpected detours that lead to the places we actually needed to go. The discomfort we feel in the face of the unknown is rooted in our belief that if we aren't in control, we aren't safe. We view the future as a series of potential catastrophes and use our planning as a shield. But look at the birds in the sky. They do not store grain in barns, they do not have bank accounts or 5-year strategies. They trust that the world will provide what they need for the present day. This is not to say we should abandon all responsibility, but rather to recognize the heavy, unnecessary burden of trying to guarantee the future. You are never as fragile as your anxious mind tells you that you are. When you allow yourself to sit with uncertainty, you begin to develop a different kind of strength, resilience. Resilience is not the ability to prevent life from getting messy, it is the capacity to trust that you can handle the mess once it arrives. It is the wisdom to know that you have weathered every storm up to this point and that your internal resources are far greater than your external circumstances. This trust is the ultimate form of emotional freedom. It allows you to move through your day with a lightness of heart, knowing that while you cannot dictate the weather, you are fully capable of navigating the changing seasons. Consider the metaphor of the ocean. The surface may be turbulent, with waves crashing and tides pulling in opposing directions, but deep beneath the surface, there is a place of profound stillness and stability. Uncertainty is the surface of life, trust is the depth. When we live only on the surface, we are tossed about by every change in the environment. But when we anchor ourselves in the awareness of our own presence, we realize that we can remain centered even when the conditions are chaotic. This doesn't mean you stop caring about your future, it means you stop using the future as a hostage to your current peace. The ego hates the unknown because it cannot calculate the outcome. It wants to know exactly what is coming so it can prepare its defense. But life doesn't operate on a ledger. It operates on mystery. Think of the way a seed grows into a tree. It does not know what it will look like, how tall it will grow, or what kind of fruit it will eventually bear. It simply obeys the impulse to grow. It trusts the light, the rain, and the earth. We are part of that same living intelligence. When we stop trying to dictate the outcome, we allow the seed of our own potential to unfold in ways that are authentic to who we are, rather than conforming to an arbitrary plan. There is a gentle, quiet joy in living without knowing. It turns life into an adventure rather than a chore. Imagine entering a bookstore without a specific title in mind. You wander the aisles, picking up books, reading snippets, and eventually finding something that resonates with your soul. If you had gone in with a strict list of only one title, you might have missed that book entirely. Life is like that bookstore. When you stop demanding that your life match your internal list, you open yourself up to the wisdom, the beauty, and the experiences that are meant for you. We are often paralyzed by the what-if scenarios. What if I fail? What if I lose everything? These questions are the ego's way of keeping us small. The counter-question is, what if it all works out better than I could have imagined? The universe is not conspiring against you, it is unfolding through you. Uncertainty is the space where the new can be born. If you already knew the ending, the journey would be redundant. It is the mystery of the unfolding story that makes the experience of living so vibrant, so precious, and so vital. This shift requires a radical kind of courage, the courage to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is the willingness to show up in the present moment without the armor of a guaranteed outcome. It is the ability to say, I don't know what is coming, and that is okay. In that admission, you find a tremendous amount of power. You are no longer living in a state of constant, defensive tension. You are breathing, you are observing, and you are waiting to see what the next moment will bring. You are finally, truly awake. When you stop trying to wrestle the future into submission, you find that the present moment has everything you need. You aren't distracted by the phantom fears of tomorrow. You are here. You are present. And in this presence, you find the clarity to make the right choices for the now. You find that you have the wisdom to handle whatever is required, and that is the only security that matters. Peace is not found in the resolution of uncertainty, it is found in the deepening of our trust in life's natural, unfolding grace. Chapter Summary. Uncertainty is not a problem to be solved, but a necessary space for growth and possibility. Rigid planning often closes us off to the creative, unexpected detours that define our best experiences. The anxiety we feel about the future is a survival mechanism that, when uncontrolled, keeps us trapped in fear. Resilience is the trust that you possess the inner resources to handle any situation that arises. Trusting the process is like the seed growing into a tree, it is an act of surrendering to life's intelligence. The what-if scenarios we fear are projections of the ego, while the what if it works out perspective opens the door to potential. Vulnerability in the face of the unknown is a sign of great emotional strength, not weakness. Living without knowing turns the experience of life into an adventure rather than a predictable, exhausting chore. Presence is the ultimate antidote to the fear of the unknown, it anchors us in the only time we can actually control. True security is found in trusting our own capacity to respond to life, rather than in Chapter 6, the peace hidden in the present moment. We have become experts at living everywhere except where we actually are. Our minds are time-traveling machines, constantly commuting between the regret of yesterday and the anxiety of tomorrow. We are physically seated in a chair, but mentally, we are rehashing a conversation from 3 years ago or agonizing over a deadline that is 2 weeks away. This constant mental displacement is the primary thief of our peace. We treat the present moment as a mere waiting room, a transit lounge we must endure on our way to some supposedly better, more important destination. But what if this moment is not a means to an end, but the destination itself? Consider the simple, profound reality of your own breathing. It only happens in the now. You cannot breathe yesterday's air, and you cannot breathe tomorrow's. Life, in its most fundamental expression, is a series of present moments, one after another, stitched together by the steady rhythm of your own heart. When you bring your awareness fully into the present, the narrative of who I am and what I have to do begins to quiet down. The past, which is nothing more than a collection of fading memories, loses its power to haunt you. The future, which is a landscape of mental projections, loses its power to intimidate you. In this space of pure presence, you find a stillness that is not dependent on your circumstances. We often fear the present moment because we believe that if we stop thinking about the future, we will lose our edge, that we will become aimless or lazy. We are terrified that if we aren't constantly managing the next 5 steps, the entire structure of our lives will crumble. But presence is not the absence of action, it is the presence of clarity. When you are fully in the present, your actions are no longer fueled by fear or frantic compulsion. They are guided by intuition and wisdom. You don't need to worry about the future because you are handling the present with such grace and attention that the future is being built on a solid foundation. Think of a musician playing a complex piece of music. If they spend the entire time worrying about the difficult transition coming up in the next measure, they will lose the rhythm of the current note. If they dwell on the mistake they made in the last measure, they will fall behind. The beauty of the music is created only when the musician is entirely immersed in the note being played right now. That is where the flow resides. Your life is the music, and the present moment is the note. When you play every note with full awareness, the entire song becomes a masterpiece, regardless of its tempo or complexity. This practice of presence is what many wisdom traditions call the gate. It is the narrow way that leads to life. It is narrow because you can only pass through it one moment at a time. You cannot carry the heavy baggage of your past grudges or your future expectations through that gate. They are simply too wide, too cumbersome. To enter the kingdom of inner peace, you must arrive empty-handed. You must leave the stories behind. This sounds difficult, but it is actually the most natural thing in the world. Being present is not something you have to learn, it is something you have to remember, because it is your natural state before the mind starts cluttering it with commentary. Nature is our greatest teacher of this. Have you ever watched a cat resting in a sunbeam? I am not wondering if I will have enough food tomorrow. I am not regretting the mouse it failed to catch yesterday. It is completely, totally, and utterly here. Its entire being is anchored in the warmth of the sun and the texture of the floor. There is a profound integrity to that kind of existence. We look at that cat and we call it peaceful. We forget that we are made of the same fabric as the cat. We, too, are meant to be present. The only difference is that we have the unique, human burden of a mind that can wander away from the feast of the now. The practice of mindfulness is often misunderstood as some complex, exotic technique. But it is really just the act of returning home. Whenever you notice your mind has wandered, when you find yourself lost in a loop of worry or judgment, simply recognize it. You don't need to scold yourself or try to forcefully empty your mind. Just notice that you are gone, and then gently return. It is like training a puppy. You don't hit the puppy for wandering, you just keep gently guiding it back to the mat. With each return, you grow stronger. With each return, you peel away another layer of the habitual resistance that keeps you from the current moment. When you are truly present, you begin to see that most of your problems were actually illusions created by the mind's time traveling. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Was it really the task at hand that was unbearable, or was it your internal countdown of all the things that came after it? We suffer because we try to experience the entire week, the entire project, or the entire year in a single moment. We try to swallow the ocean in one gulp. But you only ever have to deal with this one moment. You only have to make one decision, one action, one breath. When you shrink your world down to the size of right now, the weight becomes manageable. There is a divine irony here. By fully engaging with the present, you actually become much more effective at navigating the future. You are no longer acting on the frantic, reactive energy of the ego, which is always trying to protect itself. You are acting from a place of deep connection to reality. You make better choices, you listen more deeply, and you respond with a clarity that is impossible to achieve when your mind is fragmented across time. Peace is not found by running away from the current moment, it is found by diving into it, completely and without reservation. As you begin to anchor yourself in the now, you will find that the world around you seems to change. It isn't that your challenges disappear, but your relationship with them transforms. You see them as they are, not as your fears have painted them. You start to notice the small, beautiful things, the way the light hits the wall, the sound of someone's voice, the texture of your own skin, that were always there, but that you were too busy and too distracted to notice. You start to live your life instead of just thinking about it. You find that you have arrived exactly where you were trying to go all along, home. Chapter Summary. Our habit of time traveling mentally between the past and future is the primary cause of our internal unrest. The present moment is the only place where life actually occurs, it is the destination, not just a transition. Presence is not an escape from reality, but the most grounded and effective way to engage with it. Just as a musician must focus on the current note to create music, we must focus on the current moment to live fully. Entering the gate of presence requires us to set down the heavy baggage of our past and our anxieties about the future. Animals like cats demonstrate the profound, natural peace that comes from being fully anchored in the now. Mindfulness is simply the act of noticing when the mind has wandered and gently returning to the present. We suffer because we try to experience the entire scope of our future problems at once, rather than one moment at a time. True effectiveness in life comes from clear, present moment awareness rather than ego-driven reactivity. Peace is found by diving fully. Chapter 7, When Fear Becomes Your Greatest Teacher. We are raised to view fear as a red light, a signal to stop, to retreat, and to keep ourselves safe within the confines of the known. We treat it like an intruder that needs to be chased away or muffled. Yet, if we look at fear with the eyes of a student rather than a victim, we discover that it is one of our most potent instruments of transformation. Fear is not merely an indicator of danger, it is the boundary line of our growth. It marks the exact place where your current reality ends and your potential begins. Think of a bird learning to fly. The moment it stands on the edge of the nest, looking down at the vast, yawning expanse of the air, it feels fear. That fear is not a sign that it shouldn't jump, it is a signal that it is about to transition from one way of being to another. The air is unfamiliar, the gravity is real, and the outcome is not guaranteed. If the bird listens only to the fear, it remains in the safety of the nest, which eventually becomes a cage. But if it feels the fear and jumps anyway, it discovers the gift of flight. Fear was not an obstacle to flying, it was a prerequisite. In our modern lives, we feel this same kind of fear whenever we stand on the precipice of a significant change, a career shift, a difficult conversation, or a decision to let go of an old identity. The ego labels this sensation as bad because it threatens the stability of our current structure. But the soul often labels this sensation as necessary. When we feel that sharp, cold tightening in our chest, instead of running away, what would happen if we leaned into it? What if we acknowledged the fear, thanked it for trying to keep us safe, and then proceeded forward with open hands? We often confuse fear with intuition, but they are distinctly different. Fear is loud, frantic, and narrow. It is obsessed with the possibility of loss. Intuition is quiet, steady, and expansive. It is centered in the possibility of becoming. Fear tells you to stay small, to hide, and to play it safe. Your deeper wisdom often tells you to step up, to speak your truth, and to embrace the unknown. When you learn to distinguish between the defensive screeching of the ego and the calm, resonant call of your own growth, you stop being a slave to your own alarm systems. Consider the historical figures we admire, those who faced immense challenges with poise and grace. They were not people who didn't feel fear. They were people who felt it acutely and chose to act in spite of it. They understood that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move through it. Every great leap in human history, every invention, every artistic breakthrough, every movement toward justice, was born from a moment where someone felt the terror of the unknown and decided that their purpose was greater than their anxiety. They turned their fear into a teacher. There is a profound humility in accepting your fear. When you admit to yourself, "I am terrified of this," and that is okay, you instantly take away its power to paralyze you. You are no longer trying to perform the impossible task of being fearless. You are simply being a human being navigating a difficult moment. This is the heart of resilience. You don't have to be a superhero to endure the storm, you just have to be willing to feel the wind without losing your footing. By acknowledging your fear, you integrate it, and in that integration, it ceases to be a monster and becomes a guide. Nature is filled with examples of this dynamic. Think of the fire that burns through a forest. It is a terrifying, destructive force that seems to leave only ash in its wake. Yet, it is precisely this fire that clears away the dead, crowded brush, releases the seeds of certain trees that can only sprout in the heat, and replenishes the soil for a more vibrant, diverse ecosystem. The forest grows back stronger, healthier, and more resilient than it was before the fire. Your own fires, your crises, your heartbreaks, your periods of intense uncertainty, can function in the exact same way. They burn through the illusions and the habits that were keeping you stagnant, preparing the ground for a new, more authentic version of you to emerge. This is why we must stop trying to numb ourselves whenever the uncomfortable sensation of fear arises. We reach for distractions, our phones, our work, our comforts, our rigid routines, anything to keep from feeling the heat. But when we numb the fear, we inadvertently numb our growth. We stay in a state of suspended animation. The wisdom of the ages, including the teachings that invite us to fear not, is not asking us to be emotionally lobotomized. It is inviting us to trust in a power that is greater than our circumstances. It is a call to move forward with the knowledge that we are held by something larger than our individual anxieties. When you look at fear as a teacher, you begin to seek it out in small, manageable ways. You might choose to speak up in a meeting, to initiate a conversation you've been avoiding, or to try something new that makes you feel slightly out of your depth. You start to treat your life as a practice ground. With every small step, the grip of fear loosens. You realize that the world didn't end, you didn't disappear, and you actually gained a new piece of information about your own capabilities. You are expanding your territory. You are becoming someone who knows that even in the face of the unknown, you are capable of showing up. Ultimately, fear is just energy. It is a high-octane fuel that can either freeze you in place or propel you into your next chapter. The choice is not whether you will feel the fear, but what you will do with it. Will you let it be a wall that marks the boundary of your existence, or will you let it be a bridge that carries you to the other side? When you treat fear as a teacher, you stop being a victim of your own nervous system and start being the architect of your own evolution. You find that the things you were most afraid of were often the very things that were required to set you free. Chapter Summary. Fear is not an enemy to be silenced, but a powerful indicator of the boundary where your growth begins. The ego labels fear as a danger, but your deeper wisdom often recognizes it as a necessary threshold for transformation. Courage is defined by the ability to act in the presence of fear, not by the absence of it. Distinguishing between frantic, ego-driven fear and calm, purposeful intuition is a vital life skill. Admitting your fear is an act of humility and a way to strip the emotion of its power to paralyze you. Like a forest fire that leads to renewal, our personal crises can clear the way for authentic growth. Numbing our fear through constant distraction also numbs our capacity to evolve and expand. Trusting in a greater power allows us to move through the unknown with steady confidence. Using life as a practice ground to face small fears builds the resilience required for larger transitions. Fear is simply energy, it is up to us whether we use it as a wall or... Chapter 8, The Quiet Wisdom of Stillness. We live in a culture that treats speed as a virtue and busyness as a badge of honor. We measure our worth by our output, our visibility, and the length of our to-do lists. To sit still is often perceived as a waste of time, a sign of laziness, or a failure to capitalize on the opportunities of the day. Yet, the most profound insights, the deepest healing, and the truest clarity do not come from the frantic activity of the surface. They emerge from the quiet depths of stillness. Stillness is not a void, it is the space where the wisdom that was already inside you finally has the room to speak. Think of a glass of muddy water. If you keep shaking it, the water remains cloudy and opaque. You cannot see through it, and you certainly cannot see what is resting at the bottom. But if you set the glass down on a flat surface and allow it to sit, the sediment begins to settle. The water gradually clears, until eventually, you can see perfectly through to the other side. Your mind is like that glass. The mud is your worries, your judgments, your plans, and your reactions. When you are constantly shaking your mind with activity, you live in a state of clouded perception. Stillness is the act of setting the glass down and letting the mud settle so that you can see reality as it truly is. Stillness is also the place where you reconnect with your own essence. When you are always doing, you are operating from your secondary, personality-driven self, the part of you that is trying to impress, succeed, and defend. But when you move into stillness, you drop down into the primary, conscious I that exists beneath the personality. This is the part of you that isn't concerned with the opinions of others or the metrics of success. It is the part of you that is simply, profoundly alive. In this silence, you discover that you don't need to become anything to be enough, you already are. There is a beautiful, historical tradition of retreat found in almost every major philosophy and spiritual lineage. Think of the sages who climbed mountains or the contemplatives who retreated to deserts. They were not running away from life, they were going into the silence so they could return to the world with a perspective that was untainted by the chaos of the crowd. They understood that if you want to be a source of peace, clarity, or wisdom for others, you must first cultivate those qualities within yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot bring stillness to a chaotic room if your own inner world is in turmoil. Nature is the ultimate master of this quiet power. Look at a mountain. It does not exert any visible effort to remain grand. It does not move to prove its existence or change its shape to suit the clouds. It simply stands in a state of absolute, immovable stillness. Yet, it exerts a gravitational force that draws the eye and inspires the soul. That is the power of being. When you embody that kind of inner stillness, you don't need to shout to be heard or force your will upon others. You carry a presence that is steady, grounded, and undeniably magnetic. The ego finds this kind of stillness incredibly threatening because in the silence, the ego's frantic narrative begins to fade. If you aren't talking, planning, or worrying, who are you? The ego needs the noise to maintain the illusion of its importance. This is why many people find meditation or silent reflection to be deeply uncomfortable at first. You might notice a sudden urge to check your phone, get up and clean the house, or jump into a project. That is the ego trying to regain control by creating noise. The practice is not to fight the noise, but to notice it, let it be, and keep returning to the silence. This isn't about avoiding the responsibilities of your life. It is about approaching them from a place of center. A leader who speaks from a place of stillness is far more effective than a leader who speaks from a place of agitation. A parent who listens from a place of stillness can hear the needs beneath their child's surface behavior. A professional who works from a place of stillness makes decisions with intuition rather than fear. Stillness acts as a filter, removing the distorted vibrations of anxiety and leaving only the clear, actionable truth. You can practice this throughout your day, even if you don't have the luxury of an hour for formal meditation. It can be found in the in-between moments. When you are waiting for a meeting to start, don't immediately pull out your phone. Use that as a pocket of stillness. When you are washing the dishes, bring your full awareness to the warmth of the water and the sensation of the soap. That is stillness in action. When you are walking from your car to your office, take a moment to feel the ground beneath your feet. These microdoses of stillness accumulate, creating a baseline of peace that remains with you even when the day turns hectic. The wisdom of stillness is the wisdom of the seed. A seed does not grow by sprinting. It grows by sitting in the dark, silent earth, absorbing what it needs, and waiting for the right moment to emerge. You are always in a process of becoming, but that process requires the dark periods of rest and reflection. When you resist the stillness, you are effectively cutting off your own roots. When you embrace it, you allow yourself to grow from a place of deep, nourished strength. Stillness brings you back to the present, and the present is where your true power resides. When you are still, you aren't fighting the past or fearing the future. You are fully attuned to the reality that is happening right now, and because you are attuned, you can respond with grace, intelligence, and compassion. You become a person who can move through the storm, not because the storm has stopped, but because you have found a place of absolute, unshakable quiet at your own center. You realize that while the world may continue to spin with chaos, you have the ability to remain in the eye of the hurricane, calm and at peace. Chapter Summary. Speed and busyness are often used as defense mechanisms, but stillness is where true wisdom and clarity are found. The mind is like muddy water, it must be allowed to sit still for the sediment of thoughts and worries to settle. Stillness allows us to connect with our deeper, conscious self, beyond the ego's personality-driven needs. Throughout history, sages have used silence to cultivate the perspective needed to lead and help others effectively. Nature demonstrates the power of being, showing us that true influence often comes from a grounded, immovable presence. The ego fears silence because it cannot maintain its noisy narrative when there is nothing to react to. Practicing stillness does not mean avoiding work, but rather acting from a place of clarity rather than agitation. We can cultivate microdoses of stillness throughout the day by bringing full awareness to mundane, in-between moments. Just as a seed needs the dark, silent earth to root, we need stillness to nourish our personal growth. Stillness allows us to remain centered in the eye of the hurricane, providing a steady response to. Chapter 9, Trusting Life Without Knowing the Outcome. We often view trust as a reward for predictable behavior. We say, "I will trust you once you prove you are reliable," or "I will trust that life is good once my bank account is full and my health is perfect." This is the ego's version of trust, it is a transaction. But true, transformative trust is not something you give because the evidence is clear, it is something you choose to embody precisely when the evidence is missing. It is the leap of faith that allows you to walk forward when the path ahead is obscured by mist. When we cling to the need for a guaranteed outcome, we are essentially trying to play the role of the architect, the builder, and the judge of our own lives. We act as if we are the only ones capable of directing the flow of the river, forgetting that we are also part of the water. To trust life is to recognize that there is an intelligence animating existence. A wisdom that governs the way seasons change, the way cells regenerate, and the way wounds heal. This intelligence is not separate from you, it is moving through you. When you align your will with this deeper flow, you stop being a frantic micromanager and start being a courageous participant. Think of a bird in flight. It does not fly by analyzing the air density, calculating the wind speed, or wondering if the atmosphere will hold it up tomorrow. It flies because it trusts the medium it inhabits. It trusts that the air will be there, that its wings will catch the current, and that its internal instinct will know the way. If the bird hesitated and demanded a guarantee of flight before it jumped, it would never leave the branch. You are just as much a part of the fabric of this reality as the bird is of the sky. The universe is not a hostile environment that you must conquer, it is a supportive reality that you are designed to inhabit. The ego interprets not knowing the outcome as a form of danger. It translates uncertainty into the language of panic. But trust translates uncertainty into the language of possibility. When you don't know the outcome, you are in a state of pure creative potential. If you could see the end of your journey, you would likely be bored, or worse, you would be limited by your current imagination. The beauty of life is that it often delivers outcomes far beyond the scope of what we could have planned for ourselves. Trust is the humble admission that life's intelligence is infinitely greater than your ego's blueprint. Consider the times you have faced a major disappointment. At the time, it felt like an ending, a closed door, a failed project, a rejection. But looking back from the vantage point of the present, can you see how that failure was the very thing that cleared the path for something more meaningful to emerge? Maybe the job you didn't get led you to the career you love. Maybe the relationship that ended taught you the self-respect you needed to thrive. Trust is the ability to look at the closed doors of today with the patience of someone who knows that the architecture of their life is more complex and more benevolent than they can see in the moment. This is the deeper meaning of the teaching, do not worry about tomorrow. This is not a command to be reckless or irresponsible. It is an invitation to shift your focus from the exhausting labor of trying to control the future to the vital work of living fully in the now. When you spend your energy worrying about outcomes that have not yet occurred, you are effectively absent from your life. You are living in a phantom world. Trust is the act of anchoring yourself in the present, doing the work that is in front of you with excellence and integrity, and then letting the results unfold in their own time. We often feel that if we aren't worrying, we aren't doing our part. We confuse anxiety with care. We think that if we don't stress, we don't love, or we don't value our goals. But anxiety is not a form of labor, it is a form of resistance. It is the psychic equivalent of holding your breath. Trust is the act of exhaling. It is the recognition that the world has survived for eons without your constant, panicked supervision, and it will likely continue to thrive even if you decide to lighten your grip. Practicing trust is a skill that is developed in small, daily increments. It starts with the minor things, trusting that you can handle a difficult conversation without knowing the exact response you will receive, trusting that you can walk into a room of strangers and find your way, trusting that even on your off days, you have the inner resilience to recover. These small acts of trust are like muscles. The more you exercise them, the more confident you become in your ability to handle the unknown. You stop being afraid of the gaps between what you know and what you don't know, and you start to see those gaps as spaces for adventure. There is a sense of relief that comes when you finally surrender the burden of the outcome. You realize that you were never designed to carry the weight of the entire future on your shoulders. You were designed to act, to love, to learn, and to grow. The outcome is not your property, it is the fruit of the seeds you plant and the conditions of the soil. When you take care of the planting, your intentions, your efforts, your kindness, the harvest will come in its own way and in its own time. You can trust that. Ultimately, trust is the foundation of emotional freedom. When you trust life, you stop being a prisoner of your own projections. You don't need to manipulate people or force circumstances because you know that you are okay, regardless of what happens. You are rooted in a source of strength that cannot be touched by external events. This is the peace that passes understanding. It isn't a peace that comes because you have predicted everything, it is a peace that comes because you are comfortable with the mystery of existence. You are ready for anything, not because you have a plan for everything, but because you trust your capacity to meet whatever arrives. Chapter Summary. True trust is not a transaction based on evidence, it is a choice made despite the uncertainty of the future. The ego sees not knowing the outcome as a danger, while wisdom sees it as a space of infinite possibility. We are participants in an unfolding reality, not sole architects, and our lives often grow in directions beyond our current imagination. Aligning our efforts with life's natural intelligence allows us to move from frantic control to calm, intentional participation. Trust is the ability to view current, closed doors, as necessary shifts that lead to future growth. Not worrying is not recklessness, it is a redirection of energy from mental anxiety to present moment action. Anxiety is often mistaken for care, but it is actually a form of resistance. Trust is the act of letting go of that tension. Trusting life is a muscle that is strengthened through small, daily practice in navigating the unknown. When we focus on our internal integrity and efforts, we can release the burden of needing to dictate the results. Emotional freedom is found when we accept the mystery of life and trust our own resilience to handle whatever. Chapter 10, Flow instead of Force. We often approach our lives as if we are trying to carve a sculpture out of stubborn stone. We use our will like a chisel, striking repeatedly at the world, our careers, and our relationships, demanding that they conform to our precise specifications. We believe that if we apply enough force, if we work longer, argue louder, and push harder, we can finally achieve the result we want. But the universe is not a stone to be carved, it is a river to be navigated. When you rely on force, you exhaust yourself and create massive amounts of resistance. When you learn to flow, you find that your power is amplified by the current itself. Flow is the state of effortless action. It is that rare, magical time when you are so deeply engaged in what you are doing that the sense of you, as a separate, striving ego disappears. You aren't thinking about the past, you aren't worrying about the outcome, and you certainly aren't judging your own performance. You are simply the activity itself. This is the state where the highest level of human creativity, productivity, and peace is found. Flow doesn't mean you aren't working hard, it means you aren't working against yourself. The ego believes that force is the only way to get things done because it views the world as a place of scarcity and opposition. It assumes that if it doesn't push, nothing will move. But force is heavy, rigid, and fragile. It requires constant maintenance and constant exertion. Flow, by contrast, is light, adaptive, and sustainable. It is the difference between trying to swim against a raging tide and learning how to surf the wave. One leads to drowning, the other leads to an exhilarating ride. You still have to do the work of surfing, you have to balance, you have to watch the water, and you have to be ready to move, but you are using the energy of the ocean rather than fighting it. Think of the way a vine grows. It doesn't grow by forcing its way through the trellis. It grows by feeling for the structure, finding the support, and then expanding into the space that is available. It is opportunistic, flexible, and resilient. If it meets a wall, it doesn't try to bash its way through, it changes direction and looks for a window or a crack. In your own life, flow is the ability to recognize where the support is and where the resistance is. When you encounter a wall in your path, flow isn't about giving up. It's about asking, is there another way to get to where I need to be? This is the principle of Wu Wei, the ancient wisdom of effortless action. It suggests that the most effective leaders, creators, and thinkers are those who know how to harmonize their actions with the natural laws of their environment. They don't try to force a tree to grow faster by pulling on its branches. They create the right conditions, sun, water, soil, and then they step back and let the life force do the work. In your professional life, this means focusing on the conditions for success rather than obsessing over the outcome. In your personal life, it means creating the space for love and connection to grow rather than demanding that it look a specific way. When you try to use force to resolve an emotional conflict, you almost always make it worse. Have you ever tried to force someone to understand your perspective? The harder you push, the more they dig in their heels. You have created a power struggle. Flow, in a conversation, looks like listening. It looks like acknowledging the other person's reality before sharing your own. By lowering your own defenses, you lower the temperature of the room. You move from a state of confrontation to a state of collaboration. You are no longer trying to force the truth upon them, you are creating a flow where the truth can be discovered together. The irony of the ego's obsession with force is that it actually makes us weaker. When you are bracing for a fight, your body becomes tense, your mind becomes narrow, and your ability to see creative alternatives disappears. You are using all your energy to hold the force in place. When you let go and enter a state of flow, you are relaxed but alert. You are like a martial artist who is ready to move in any direction. You aren't committed to one fixed path. You are committed to the most effective path. You save your energy for the moments that truly matter, and you respond with precision rather than broad, wasted strikes. We often fear that if we don't force, we will be passive. But flow is not passivity. It is highly active. The river is not passive, it is doing a tremendous amount of work carving the canyon. It is just doing it without the internal drama of resistance. You can be incredibly driven, ambitious, and productive while still being in a state of flow. The difference is that you are no longer the source of the pressure, you are the vessel through which the energy moves. You are working with the intelligence of life rather than against it. How do you enter this state? Start by noticing your own internal tension. Where are you gripping? Where are you forcing yourself? Where are you trying to make something happen that just isn't ready to move? When you feel that friction, pause and ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped pushing? Often, you will find that the world continues to move just fine without your desperate insistence. You can then gently shift your energy toward what is currently opening for you, rather than beating your head against what is closed. Flow is the ultimate act of trust. It is the decision to believe that you don't have to be the sole engine of your own life. You are a part of a larger ecosystem of events, people, and opportunities. When you align yourself with that flow, you find that things start to happen with a sense of rightness. You make the right call at the right time, you meet the right person when you need to, and you find the solution to a problem just as you are about to give up. You are no longer struggling to write the script, you are enjoying the performance. And in that enjoyment, you find the strength to move mountains, not by force, but by the quiet, unstoppable persistence of the river. Chapter Summary. Force is the ego's way of creating change, but it is heavy, exhausting, and creates massive resistance. Flow is the state of effortless action where you align your energy with the natural currents of life. The ego uses force because it fears scarcity, flow operates from the understanding of partnership. Flexibility and the ability to adapt are the primary markers of those who have mastered flow. In relationships, forcing perspectives creates conflict, while flowing through listening creates connection. The principle of Wu Wei teaches us that the most effective action is often the one that works with nature, not against it. Tension is the enemy of flow, noticing where we are gripping is the first step toward releasing it. Flow is not passivity. It is a high-functioning state of alertness and precise, effective action. By shifting our energy toward what is opening rather than what is closed, we discover the path of least resistance. Trusting the flow allows you to stop being the sole engine of your life and start being a vessel for a larger, more powerful. Chapter 11, Freedom Beyond Attachment. We tend to measure our lives by the things we have managed to hold on to. We curate our identities through our possessions, our achievements, our relationships, and even our memories. We believe that these attachments are the pillars holding up our sense of self. If we lose the job, we lose our status. If the relationship ends, we lose our worth. If the memory of the past is challenged, we lose our security. But what if these very pillars are the source of our deepest fragility? Attachment is the belief that something outside of you is required to make you whole. Freedom, conversely, is the realization that you are already complete, and that your experience of life is enriched, not defined, by what comes and goes. The ego loves attachment because it provides a map. It says, I am the one who owns this house, I am the one who has this title, I am the one who is married to this person. It creates a story that feels solid and permanent. But reality is a continuous process of change. Everything you are attached to, your body, your roles, your reputation, your possessions, is subject to the law of impermanence. When you tie your happiness to things that are destined to change, you are essentially tying your anchor to a passing cloud. You will inevitably be tossed about by the wind of circumstance. Consider the metaphor of a hand. If you hold a handful of sand, you have a small amount. If you squeeze your fist tight, you might keep a few grains, but you hurt your hand in the process and lose the freedom of your grip. If you open your hand, you can hold much more, and you are free to reach for something else at any moment. You have the sand, but you are not defined by the sand. You are the hand that holds it. Attachment is the clenching, freedom is the open palm. You can have things, you can love people, and you can pursue goals, but you do so without the frantic need for them to remain exactly the same forever. When we are attached, we live in a state of constant, low-grade fear. We are perpetually afraid of losing what we have. This fear prevents us from truly enjoying the present. You cannot fully love a person if you are constantly terrified they might leave you. You cannot fully enjoy your work if you are always anxious about your reputation. Attachment turns love into a form of possession, and passion into a form of stress. True freedom is the ability to hold things loosely. It is the ability to say, I am grateful for this experience, I love this person, I appreciate this work, but my internal peace is not dependent on its permanence. This is the deeper meaning of the practice of non-attachment. It is not about becoming cold, detached, or indifferent to the world. It is about becoming deeply present and appreciative. Think of a guest in a beautiful hotel. You enjoy the room, you appreciate the view, you sleep in the comfortable bed, but you do not try to take the furniture home with you when you leave. You know that it is a temporary experience, and because you know it is temporary, you enjoy it all the more. When you view your life as a guest, you are no longer burdened by the need to protect, hoard, or control. You are free to experience the beauty of the moment without the shadow of future loss. The ego fears this because it believes that if you aren't attached, you don't care. It equates passion with clinging. But there is a different, higher form of passion, the passion of the flow. When you are not attached to the outcome, you can give yourself fully to the process. You are not holding back energy to defend your position. You are all in. This is the difference between playing a game with the desperation of someone who is afraid to lose, and playing it with the joy of someone who simply loves the game. The latter is far more effective, far more creative, and far more likely to succeed. Look at the seasons again. A tree does not cling to its leaves in the autumn. It does not panic when they turn brown and fall to the ground. It knows that the leaves were a gift for the summer, not a permanent part of its identity. It trusts that it has the capacity to grow new ones when the conditions are right. You are a perennial being. You have gone through many autumns in your life, losses, changes, endings, and yet, you have always had the capacity to bloom again. Your worth is not tied to the leaves of your current circumstances, it is tied to the life force that animates your growth. When you let go of your attachments, you find that your perspective shifts. You start to see yourself as the witness of your life rather than just the actor in the drama. You can see the joys and the sorrows, the gains and the losses, and you realize that none of them is you. They are just the weather passing through your field of awareness. This detachment is the most liberating thing in the world. It means that even when things go wrong, you are still fundamentally okay. Your safety is not in your circumstances, it is in your consciousness. The practice of releasing attachment starts with noticing where you are clenching. Where do you feel the most fear? What is the one thing you are most terrified of losing? Begin there. Not by forcefully throwing it away, but by gently acknowledging that your attachment to it is the source of your unease. Practice gratitude for it today, while also reminding yourself that it is a temporary gift. This small mental shift changes your relationship from one of grasping to one of appreciation. You move from, I need this to be happy, to, I am happy to have this in my life. Freedom is the space that opens up when the ego stops needing to own the world. It is a vast, quiet, and incredibly expansive space. In that space, you aren't just existing, you are flourishing. You are no longer navigating by the light of what you possess, but by the light of your own awareness. And in that light, you see that you have never really been missing anything. You are the source of your own joy, the container for your own experiences, and the master of your own peace. That is the freedom that nothing can ever take away. Chapter Summary. Attachments are the pillars the ego uses to build a sense of self, but they are also the source of our fragility. The law of impermanence ensures that everything we cling to will eventually change, making attachment a source of constant anxiety. Attachment is a clenched fist approach to life. Freedom is the open palm approach. We fear that losing our attachments means losing our worth, but our value is intrinsic, not dependent on external factors. True freedom is holding things loosely, enjoying them fully without the burden of needing them to be permanent. Non-attachment is not cold indifference, it is the capacity to appreciate life without the shadow of future loss. Like a guest in a hotel, viewing life as a temporary experience allows us to enjoy it more deeply. We can release attachments by noticing where we are clenching and shifting our mindset to gratitude. True security is found in our consciousness, not in our circumstances, meaning we are okay regardless of what we have. Freedom is the spaciousness that emerges when we stop trying to own our life and start participating. Chapter 12, Living with an Open Heart. If life is a river, then an open heart is the vessel that allows us to travel without capsizing. We often believe that keeping our hearts closed, shielded, and guarded is the best way to avoid being hurt. We build thick walls, adopt cynical attitudes, and limit our vulnerability, thinking these are the armor of the resilient. But a closed heart is not a safe heart, it is a stagnant one. It is a heart that is deprived of the very thing it needs to flourish. Connection. An open heart is not a sign of weakness or an invitation to be taken advantage of, it is the ultimate expression of courage. To live with an open heart is to be willing to feel the full spectrum of the human experience, the joy, the grief, the frustration, and the triumph, without needing to numb any of it. When you close your heart to avoid the pain of disappointment, you also inadvertently close it to the beauty of genuine connection. You cannot selectively dim your emotional capacity. If you dial down the grief, you also dial down the capacity for all. If you shield yourself from the risk of heartbreak, you also shield yourself from the depth of true love. The open heart accepts the package deal of being human. Consider the metaphor of a window. If you keep the shutters closed, you stay safe from the rain, but you also miss the light, the view, and the fresh air. You might be protected, but you are also living in a dark, stuffy room. Opening the heart is like throwing open the shutters. You let the weather in, yes, the storm as well as the sun, but you also let in the vitality of the outside world. You become a person who is truly in the world rather than just a spectator looking out through a crack in the wall. The ego believes that protection is the path to power, but the heart knows that vulnerability is the path to influence. When you approach people with an open heart, without the invisible armor of defensiveness or the hidden agenda of the ego, you create a space where they can be their authentic selves, too. Vulnerability is contagious. When you are willing to be honest about your fears, your mistakes, and your hopes, you give others permission to drop their own masks. You transform the quality of your relationships from superficial transactions into deep, soul-level connections. Living with an open heart also changes your relationship with the world's pain. It is easy to close our hearts when we see injustice, suffering, or the sheer magnitude of the world's challenges. We feel overwhelmed and turn away. But the open heart doesn't turn away, it acknowledges. It feels the weight of the moment, yet it remains anchored in the awareness that even in the middle of darkness, we can be a source of light. Compassion is not a polite emotion. It is a fierce, active engagement with the reality of others. It is the ability to keep your heart open even when you are tempted to harden it in self-defense. Nature offers a beautiful example of this in the way a garden thrives. A garden is not a sealed box, it is an open system. It requires the rain, the heat, the cold, the wind, and the interaction of 1,000 different living things. It is exposed to the elements, and precisely because it is exposed, it has the capacity to bloom. You are your own garden. You are meant to be exposed to the elements of your own life. You are meant to be moved, changed, and nurtured by the experiences that come your way. A life lived behind walls is a life that never truly grows. The ego's greatest fear in living with an open heart is that if we are not defended, we will be hurt. And the truth is, we will be hurt. We will experience rejection, we will feel loss, and we will encounter the sharp edges of the world. But there is a massive difference between being hurt and being damaged. When your heart is closed, a painful experience feels like a structural collapse because your identity is tied to your defenses. When your heart is open, a painful experience is just an experience. It hurts, yes, but it passes through you like the wind. You have the resilience to feel it, learn from it, and continue to bloom. How do you keep your heart open when life is difficult? You do it through the practice of self-compassion. If you aren't kind to yourself, you will inevitably look to others to be your shield, which makes you dependent and defensive. But when you are the primary source of your own kindness, when you can look at your own suffering and say, "I see you," and I am here for you. You don't need to build walls. You are your own sanctuary. You can stay open to the world because you know that you have the internal resources to soothe and heal yourself. Living with an open heart is ultimately about living with an open mind. It is the willingness to let go of your fixed ideas about how people should act, how your life should look, and how the world should be. When you are rigid in your thoughts, you are closed in your spirit. When you are curious, humble, and willing to learn, you remain open. You allow yourself to be surprised by the kindness of others, the beauty of the unexpected, and the wisdom of your own unfolding journey. As you step into this way of being, you will find that you no longer need to fight for your place in the world. You belong here. Your heart is an instrument of intelligence and connection. It knows how to navigate the complex landscape of human relationships, it knows how to find the beauty in the struggle, and it knows how to return to peace when the storm has passed. By living with an open heart, you are not inviting chaos, you are inviting life. You are becoming the most authentic, resilient, and fully realized version of yourself, and in doing so, you are offering the greatest possible gift to everyone you encounter. Chapter Summary. A closed heart is a stagnation, not a safety mechanism. True resilience requires an open, vulnerable engagement with life. We cannot selectively numb our emotions. Closing the heart to pain also closes it to awe and connection. Vulnerability is a courageous act that invites others to show up as their authentic selves, fostering deeper connections. Protecting oneself behind walls creates a false sense of security that prevents personal growth. Compassion is the active engagement with the world's suffering, made possible only by keeping the heart open. Being hurt is an inevitable part of human life, but it only becomes damage if we identify with our defenses. Self-compassion is the key to maintaining an open heart. It makes us our own sanctuary in times of pain. Rigidity in our thinking leads to a closed spirit, whereas curiosity and humility keep the heart open. An open heart allows life to pass through us, enabling us to learn, heal, and continue blooming after setbacks. Living with an open heart is the most authentic, resilient, and generous way to navigate the human. Closing, the art of living in flow. We have walked together through the landscapes of our own resistance, untangling the knots of the ego and learning to navigate the turbulent currents of uncertainty. We began by observing how desperately we hold on to the illusion of control, and we have arrived at the realization that our true power was never in the iron grip of the fist, but in the spaciousness of the open hand. Take a moment to look back at the journey we have shared. We have discovered that the suffering you have endured was rarely caused by the events themselves, but by the relentless, invisible commentary you layered on top of them. You have seen how the ego, that well-meaning but misguided protector, has kept you in a state of constant, exhausting battle, fighting for status, fighting for certainty, and fighting for a sense of rightness that is ultimately an illusion. The transition from resistance to acceptance is not a process of giving up. It is the ultimate act of intelligence. It is the moment you stop fighting the reality of your life and start participating in it. When you drop the heavy, outdated armor of your attachments, you do not become vulnerable, you become light. You become agile. You become someone who can move with the grace of the river, responding to every bend and every rapid with the quiet confidence of someone who understands that they are not separate from life, but a vital part of its unfolding mystery. Remember, the goal of this wisdom is not to attain a state where life stops challenging you. The goal is to evolve into a person who can meet any challenge with an open heart and a clear mind. When the next storm hits, and it will, because storms are part of the landscape of existence, you will not need to scramble for the shelter of your old, rigid defenses. You will know that you have the internal strength to bend. You will know that you can trust your ability to navigate the shifting sands of the future, not because you have a perfect plan, but because you are anchored in the deep, unshakable stillness of the present. This is the great secret of the wise: peace is not the absence of trouble, it is the presence of awareness. It is the ability to stand in the center of your own life and know that you are okay, regardless of what the external conditions look like. You have the capacity to be compassionate with yourself when you stumble, to be curious when you are afraid, and to be present when you are tempted to disappear into the fog of your own worries. You have the capacity to live with an open heart, fully exposed to the beauty and the difficulty of the human experience, and to find that you are not destroyed by it, but expanded by it. As you step forward, remember that this is a practice, not a destination. You will forget. You will tense up. You will reach for the illusion of control when the path gets dark. That is not a failure, that is simply being human. The moment you notice you have returned to your old habits, do not judge yourself. That observation itself is the spark of your freedom. With a gentle laugh at the absurdity of the ego's struggle, simply release the grip, take a deep breath, and return to the flow. You are a part of a beautiful, unfolding intelligence. You have the resilience of the mountain, the adaptability of the water, and the quiet, steady strength of the present moment. You do not need to force your life to be meaningful, you only need to show up, breathe, and participate with an open heart. The wisdom you seek is not waiting for you at the end of the road. It is right here, in the texture of this breath, in the stillness of this moment, and in the freedom of your own willingness to let go. Walk forward with confidence. You are exactly where you need to be. You have everything you need to navigate the mystery. And in the quiet art of letting go, you are